basically got into the industry because I loved lifting weights, and I started out because I wanted to stop being bullied and get attention from girls, and didn't accomplish either of those goals with weightlifting, but certainly fell in love with it, and it became a huge passion of mine. And about the time I was getting into competing in bodybuilding, I was doing my undergraduate and was originally going to do biology and switched to biochemistry on the advice of some professors who thought it would be better based on my interest in the human body. And then as I got even more into bodybuilding, I decided I wanted to pursue higher education, so I went and applied for, was accepted for a PhD at the University of Illinois, where I studied under Dr. John LAYNE, who was one of the foremost experts in the world in protein metabolism, and really had an unbelievable experience there. I'm grateful every day that I got a chance to study under him. He was one of the first people actually to do branched-chain amino acid research as it relates to skeletal muscle, and just an unbelievable plethora of knowledge. And I left there so much more educated than I did when I went in, and got to do my own research, got to publish some studies, which was very, very difficult, frustrating, but also very, very needed, especially as it relates to just teaching yourself how to be tenacious and not give up when something's hard. And in that time, kept competing in bodybuilding, kept doing well, got involved in the fitness industry, started producing content myself, and kind of parlayed that into several businesses in the fitness industry, and then most recently wrote my own contest prep book, and also won a few national titles in powerlifting, and just enjoy lifting heavy things in general.
I noticed you had posted that John Meadows endorsed your recent prep book, which John's a good friend of mine. We're both Columbus boys, so I think that speaks volumes not only to everyone in the industry, but specifically to our audience, because John has been to the store. We've done a few things with John, both in the store and out of the store. So a lot of our listeners, a lot of the people that will view this video are very familiar with John and his work. So I think that speaks volumes to who we have today as a guest, that John Meadows has endorsed his prep book. So that's how knowledgeable Dr. Norton is. Dr. Norton, I want to kind of lead off with something I find really interesting, which is the whole calories in versus calories out discussion. I know that you've been pretty well versed with what you put out there about this topic, and I kind of want to attack it from maybe the recreational lifter standpoint versus the competition prep standpoint. So if we could talk about what you feel is important to talk about with calories in versus calories out with the recreational 4 to 5 time a week weightlifter. What exactly is your thoughts on this topic?
Well, I think it's getting a lot of play right now because it seems to be the most recent trend is to try to find some kind of nutritional strategy where you don't have to worry about calories in. You just eat what you want as long as it fits paleo or keto or whatever it is diet strategy that you want to do. And a lot of people, there's a lot of hand waving involved in terms of trying to misdirect what the research actually says. And people will say things, well, see, look at this study where they were able to eat more protein and they didn't gain body fat. Or they were able to eat more fiber and they didn't gain body fat. These sorts of things. And I think the point is that calories in versus calories out is just simple. It's like a budget. No matter what you do with your money, no matter what kind of fancy investments you make, no matter what kind of accountant you have that's cooking the books or whatever it is, if you want to have a net positive money balance, you have to make more money than you spend. That's just the facts, right? Calories are the same way. If you want to lose fat, you require a negative calorie balance. Now, when we talk about calories in versus calories out, the outside of that equation the calories outside, is pretty complicated because you have, your basal metabolic rate, which is basically what your body needs to use to keep the lights on, essentially. Your non-exercise adaptive thermogenesis, which is or non-exercise activity thermogenesis, sorry. And that's just you walking around every day, fidgeting, moving your chair, this kind of stuff that I'm doing right now. Then you have your thermic effect of food, which is, our bodies are pretty similar to internal combustion engines like cars, where the conversion of energy or of gasoline to fuel is not perfect. You have to put energy in. Like when you start your car, there's a reason you need a battery. It's because you have to put energy in to get energy out of that fuel, right?
Right.
Same thing with our bodies. You have to put energy in. Now, you always get more energy out than you put in. In fact, there was a recent study done on the idea of calorie-negative foods. And like celery is considered, people say, well, it costs you more money and more energy to digest that than it does you actually get out of it. Well, that's actually not true. It's just that it does cost a lot of energy. You don't get much energy out of it, but you do get some. It is a positive energy thing. Now, could you overeat on celery? It would be very difficult. You know what I mean? And so that's one of those things where people get confused by calories in, calories out, because they say, well, you can't overeat on celery. Well, probably not, but you're also going to feel pretty awful if you're trying to get all your calories from eating celery. Like, you're going to feel pretty terrible. So calories in versus calories out matter. It's just that food choices you make can impact calories out. So if you make certain food choices like higher protein, higher fiber, you create more thermogenesis, you burn more. So that can be useful for some people. Your exercise activity, that's another element of calories out. So there are some things that do contribute to it, but the idea that you can eat a certain diet, or if you just do keto or you just do this, that calories in, calories out are irrelevant, that's just not true. Now, some people, if they do something like keto, or they do something like intermittent fasting, or they do something where they're practicing cognitive restraint, right? If you cut out carbohydrates out of your diet, maybe for you, it makes it easier for you to create a calorie deficit and lose weight. Well, you're still creating a calorie deficit, but if you don't have to track, if you're able to do that and say, hey, I don't really have to track, like I just don't eat, I don't overeat on protein and fats. If you're somebody who's like that, then hey, that's fine, right? But some people, if you tell them they can have all the protein and fat they want, I mean, they're just going to shovel down everything they can,
right.
And you can certainly gain body fat doing it that way. So it's, it's not that calories in versus calories out doesn't matter. It absolutely does matter. In fact, it's the most important thing that matters. It's just that it's a very adaptive process. It's an ever-changing process, and the behaviors, your lifestyle behaviors, can impact it. So I think that's what confuses a lot of people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I like the analogy too with money in the bank. That makes a lot of sense. So
yes, you can have the greatest investment in the world, but at the end of the day, the investment is only causing you to have a net positive balance if you are spending less than you are earning, right?
Right.
That's all there is to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a really great analogy. Let's talk about, and this is, to get a little bit on the personal side, this is where I started following Dr. Norton years ago, was with some research that he had done with BCAAs, branched-chain amino acids, and that's something that, we as a store, we have a lot of customers that come in that we, take care of and recommend products to that are BCAAs or even EAAs. And could we talk a little bit about maybe a couple topics here? BCAAs, and I know you've written about BCAAs and how they regulate glucose levels, and also what they have to do with fat loss. That's really what I want to talk about, and then maybe also a little bit on BCAAs versus EAAs, and maybe if there is one that benefits someone, a specific demographic versus an EAA. This is for this demographic. A BCAA is for this demographic.
Yeah, there is some good evidence that branched chains actually can improve kind of blood glucose control. Some people have challenged that by saying, well, you know, branch chains cause a big spike in insulin. It does cause an insulin release, but let's think about this logically for a second. If that insulin release was substantial and you just took BCAAs with no glucose, you would go hypoglycemic every time you took BCAAs, right? Now we know that doesn't happen. So either one of two things happens. It's that increase in insulin is so transient that it doesn't really make a big impact, or it is concomitantly happening with an increase in glucagon. And glucagon mobilizes glucose from cells and is also lipolytic. So, yeah, if my response would be, well, if insulin goes up, well, who cares? Because your blood sugar is not dropping. So one of two things: it's either not a big enough increase in insulin for it to actually do anything, or it's going up with glucagon, which counteracts insulin. So who cares? And it does seem to, there's kind of muddy water on this, but it does seem that branch chains can have a modest effect on, modest positive effect on blood glucose. I don't want to oversell it. It's definitely not like a treatment for diabetes or anything like that.
Right.
As far as BCAAs versus EAAs, you know, I think both can be helpful. I think that for most people, at least in the fitness industry, if you're eating a high protein diet, you're getting quite a bit of EAAs in your diet anyway. And you're getting quite a bit of BCAAs as well. However, what's unique about the BCAAs is they're not metabolized by first pass metabolism the way a lot of other essential amino acids are. So they completely bypass the gut and liver, mostly because BCAAT, the transaminase enzyme that removes the nitrogen from amino acids or from branch chains, is mostly absent in the liver and gut. So you get branch chains showing up in the bloodstream in pretty much quantitative amounts from what you eat. So I think that if you're eating a high protein diet and you're not doing something like intermittent fasting, BCAAs are probably a better anabolic bang for your buck comparatively to EAAs. If you're somebody who's doing something like intermittent fasting, where you're fasting for a good portion of the day, and then you're getting up and you want to train on an empty stomach, or you're somebody who just trains really early in the morning and you just can't get down food before you go, whether it be you don't have time or you don't feel good when you have food in your stomach and you train, this is the research we talked about off camera with Paul Wolf. If you just take BCAAs in a fasted state, they will transiently increase muscle protein synthesis, but because you don't have enough substrate from the other essential amino acids to maintain protein synthesis, it just kind of short circuits, if that makes sense. So EAAs, when taken fasted versus BCAAs, will produce a longer effect of increasing muscle protein synthesis. But if you're taking BCAAs like before, after a workout as recovery and that sort of thing, and you're also taking that amongst eating regular meals throughout the day that are high in protein, I think BCAAs are better bang for your anabolic buck. But both are tools in a tool belt. It just depends on which tool you're going to use based on your situation.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, with BCAAs not being first pass metabolized, is that kind of how they relate to fat loss? Is that kind of how they, essentially help your body use stored fat as energy as opposed to muscle tissue?
I think a couple things are going on with BCAAs in terms of fat loss. So if we think about the body essentially having two different depots of energy, it either has body fat or lean body mass to draw energy from. That's pretty much it. Lean body mass not just being muscle, but also liver, gut tissue, bone, skin, all that kind of stuff. But you either have lean or non-lean tissue to draw energy from during the caloric deficit. So if something is going to improve fat loss, it's either going to increase total energy expenditure, okay, and you maintain the same ratio, or it is going to somehow improve the ratio of, it's going to swing the ratio of tissue you're using for caloric expenditure from lean towards more non-lean tissue. And so I don't think BCAAs are necessarily thermogenic. I think that because they have a protein sparing effect, they kind of cause your body to differentially, since you have to get the calories from somewhere, if BCAAs are helping to maintain your lean body mass, you're more likely to use that stored body fat as opposed to using lean body mass for energy.
Great, yeah, that's something that I've referenced with a lot of our customers, with BCAAs not being, like you said, necessarily thermogenic, but they're getting you to use the type of energy expenditure that you would like to use while exercising. So that's
right,
phenomenal to hear.
If you just like put hard numbers on it, if you're in a 500 calorie deficit per day, and you are getting 300 of those from non-lean tissue and 200 from lean tissue, and you do something that simply shifts that ratio to 400 from non-lean tissue and 100 from lean tissue, well, now you just had a swing of 100 grams per day towards more fat loss.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I was wanting to hear. So let's, I want to talk about too, and I want to get your thoughts on essentially just peri-nutrition around, the workout. What should somebody be consuming? I think maybe specifically intra-workout, but also before and after. What are your thoughts on this as far as supplements go?
I think that, in terms of like pre-workout stuff to improve performance, things like citrulline malate, things like betaine, even beta-alanine, there's some research on, especially if you're like doing some high-intensity cardio, the beta-alanine can help. Creatine has been shown to have be a recovery agent. And then branched chains because of the recovery and reduction of delayed onset muscle soreness ability. I think that a lot gets made of pre and post workout nutrition. I think it's probably not as important as most people think. I think it's not unimportant. I think what's most important is to have kind of a regimented schedule of ways you do things, and you kind of do that as often as you can. The body likes to be in a rhythm, likes to have homeostasis. So, but if you're somebody who's eating, for example, people say, well, eat more carbs pre and post workout, but if you're on a low carb diet, how much can you actually put pre and post workout, right? So it's going to be proportional to your overall daily intake. Now, of your overall daily intake, I do think having a little bit more carbohydrate pre and post workout is probably beneficial. But people get overboard with some of this stuff, and they start, taking 100 grams of dextrose, during the workout or after, and the research says you don't really need that. And especially bodybuilders, if you eat enough total carbohydrate during the day, you're going to replenish that muscle glycogen. That's just going to happen. The only time where you really need rapid replenishment would be in a situation where you have somebody who's training multiple times a day, somebody who has extremely long training sessions, if they're training 2, 3, 4 hours, and they tend to do what we call a boink, where they're crashing during their workouts. Or you've got somebody who just has a really fast metabolism, who just tends to churn through fuel really quickly, then maybe an intra workout something can be helpful. As far as BCAAs, I think pre and post workout, I think intra is probably a little bit overkill. Probably not going to hurt you, but I think that pre and post workout gets the job done and optimizes things. But yeah, I would say, I usually have around 20 to 30% of my daily carbohydrate intake pre-workout and about the same post-workout, and then kind of spread the rest of my carbohydrate intake however I like throughout the day. But I think that, like I said, being in some kind of regimented routine where you do that pretty often, I think that might be more important than anything based on some recent data I've seen just about how for lack of a better term, your body likes to be in rhythm.
So staying consistent.
Yeah, so, even people there are some people, my girlfriend right here, she loves to train fasting. She hates eating before she trains, she hates it. I can show her whole literature that says, hey, you'll train better if you eat beforehand, but hey, if she's just not feeling it, then, you know, so, but she doesn't like feeling heavy when she works out. But
Makes sense.
Women, I love to feel nice and loaded when I go train, you know?
Right.
You know, but if I took her and I fed her a bunch of food when she's used to fasting before a workout, she's probably going to perform terribly because your body just isn't used to that. Your body will accommodate pretty much whatever you do. Your body's amazing. There are some tweaks you can do to it, you know, but as long as you're kind of doing the same similar thing, they show this with training too. Like typically training in the afternoon, you typically get a little bit better performance than if you train in the morning in terms of strength and hypertrophy. But they show that if you teach yourself to train in the morning, the results can be just as good. It just takes you a while to get used to it. And vice versa. I don't know when you tend to train, Paul, but you probably noticed that if you do something off your normal time, you're less likely to have a really good workout.
Yeah. So staying consistent really is the key. And then the other thing I'm taking from this is the body will adapt to, you know, what you need it to adapt to.
Body has an amazingly enormous capacity for adaptation.
Cool. Yeah. Great. Well, where can people find your latest contest prep book? Where can somebody reference that and buy it if they would like?
So I'm glad you asked. So it's very easy. It's they can find it at contestprepbook.com.
Easy enough. And then as far as you in general with your research and your publications that you put out there, where can somebody follow you? What's the best way to follow your work?
Yeah, the best way to follow me is my website, BioLayne.com. So I put a lot of paid and free content up there as well. A lot of video content, and we have all my publications up there. And then also, if you just follow me on social media, so Instagram, it's at BioLayne, Twitter at BioLayne, Facebook.com/Layne Norton is my athlete page, and YouTube, BioLayne. So pretty much most things are BioLayne. And I try to really put out a lot of content and make it useful for people.
What do you have coming out soon? Are there any spoilers we could talk about? Anything coming up soon?
Holly is working on an addendum to the contest prep book that's going to be a comprehensive recipe book for people in contest prep. Lower calorie, satisfying, tasty recipes that people can use if they get bored of the same old thing. So that's going to be one thing. We do have several projects in the work, most of which I can't really talk about at the moment. But I have another book in the works, so I've already started working on my second book, and that's going to be probably more powerlifting focused. So I'm going to talk about training, nutrition, mental preparation for powerlifting, for big meets, something comprehensive, just like my contest prep book, which is 264 pages, doing something enormously comprehensive for powerlifting as well, because I just don't think it really exists out there right now.
Great. All right, well, what you guys have seen is an interview with Dr. Layne Norton, and he's well known as one of the most respected minds in the industry. So this was really a treat. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Norton. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Appreciate you having me.